Hey, I'm Michael Riggs, and in this video I'm going to show you how to set up a MIDI controller to control features in Reaper. Now, I'm going to be using an Arteria keyboard for this, but this should really work with any MIDI keyboard or controller that can send control input to Reaper. Alright, so first things first, we've got to get our MIDI controller set up in Reaper so that it can recognize it and so it can control stuff. So to do that, we're going to go up to Options, go down to Preferences, and then under the audio section under MIDI devices, we're going to look at the MIDI hardware settings. And on here you should see, if it's plugged in, your MIDI controller. For me it's going to be this one right here. So to change the settings we need to double click it, and that'll give us this window. Now yours might have different options disabled, but what you need set up is we need to enable input from this device, and that'll allow us to get MIDI information. And then we also need to enable input for control messages, which is what's going to allow us to actually set up actions and control features in Reaper. Other than that, everything else you can pretty much leave as default. Just hit OK on this. And now let's go ahead and set up our first control. To do that, we're going to go up to Actions and then Show Action List. And now this can be pretty daunting at first. There's a ton of stuff that you can control, but that's honestly a good thing. For example, let's go ahead and say that we want to control the volume of track 1 up here. To do that, we're going to search for what we want to control. So we want to control volume, so we search volume. And that'll narrow down this list and make it a lot more easy to search through and find stuff. And right here we'll see set volume for track 1. And you can see I already have some MIDI channels set up, but I'm going to set it up so it also is controlled by another knob. So basically you just want to select what you want to control. So for us it's the volume for track 1. You want to click add, and then now all you have to do is just give some input. So we're just going to turn that knob and you'll see it replaces the shortcut with a MIDI channel. For me it's 118. Now there's going to be one more setting here that's going to be important for knobs, and that's going to be this MIDI CC dropdown. And here we have absolute and we have 3 different relative options. Absolute is going to basically treat the knob as wherever it's turned to, that's the value it's outputting, and that's good for knobs that maybe go from 0 to 10 or something like that. For my MIDI controller, these knobs will just spin forever. They'll just keep going. So what I need is a relative option, and what that'll do compared to absolute is relative will basically make it so once you start turning the knob, it'll take your input and apply it relative to the current value. If you set it to absolute, it's going to just read the absolute value from the knob and apply that to the volume. So for me, since I have continuous knobs, I'm going to set it to a relative option, and which one is going to be correct for you is going to depend on how you have stuff set up. So you might want to try a couple of them until you find one that sounds and works like you want it to. And that's pretty much all we should have to do. So let's hit OK here, and then we can close out of this, and you can see it's added the 118 along with my 52 that I had set up before for the MIDI channel. So yeah, let's close out. So now that we have that set up, if I go and I turn this top knob, you can see the volume on track 1 is getting adjusted. So that's really cool. So we can control track 1, and you can do this while it's playing as well. So yeah, that's awesome. Now we can control volume with the knobs on our MIDI controller. And another thing that we can do is we can turn these pads into buttons. And that is done in basically the same way. So if we go up to the Show Action List, say for example we want the button right below our knob to control a solo for the track. Let's search solo, and you can see here it already brought up what looks like the correct option for us. So set solo for track 1. So if we click on that, we can click add here, and then the same thing, we want to use this button, so we press it and we can see it got MIDI channel 14, and for this you can just set it as absolute, and we should be good to just hit OK and close out. So now if we play things back and we try to use our mute button, you'll notice that there's kind of an issue. It's only working when we're holding the button down, which I'm going to assume is not exactly what we're after. So to fix that, we're going to go back up to our actions, show the action list, and search solo again. And we're just going to scroll through this list and see if maybe anything looks better, because if we were to go back and edit it, there's really nothing here that we could change that's going to change the functionality of that. But if we scroll down, you'll see here, oh, toggle. So that sounds more like what we're after. So we're going to go up here and we can select our current action. We'll just delete it. And then we'll scroll back down to our track 1 toggle for solo. Click add. We'll do the same thing. Just hit the button. And again, we'll set this to absolute just to make sure. It doesn't really matter too much for buttons, I don't think, but just in case. So let's hit OK. Let's hit close. And now we should expect it to work like a toggle. That's working. Now, if this still isn't working for you, there might be something that you have to change for your MIDI controller itself in how the button outputs information to Reaper. For me, I can do that in this program called MIDI Control Center, which was software that came with my MIDI controller. We can see if we click on this button, and keep in mind your software might work differently, but for the most part, it should have similar controls. You'll just have to figure out how it works for your controller. But if we click this button here, we can see that I have it set up as a toggle. If it was set to a gate, it probably wouldn't be working nicely as a toggle mute button. So if that's the case for you, make sure to change it to a toggle and then switch back to Reaper and try again and see if that works. Now, while we're here, another thing I'd like to point out is you can customize options for these buttons. So for this knob, we have it set to 118 for the CC number, which, by the way, stands for control change or continuous control. Those are both common terms for it. But basically, it's just the MIDI number that it's outputting information from. Something common for a lot of MIDI controllers is you'll have options to change these knobs depending on a certain mode that you're in. For me, I have different memories up here that I can apply settings to. So right now, I have everything applied to memory 3, but if I were to go to memory 4, and then we were to make some changes here, for example, if we made this knob 119, and if we made this button 15 and left it as a toggle, now if we were to save and store this to my memory 4 slot, when we go back to Reaper, I can use the same knobs and buttons to control different things in Reaper depending on what mode I'm in on my controller. So let me show you that now. So back in Reaper, let's say we want to set up those same controls, the volume and the solo button, but we want to make it control track 2 if we're in a different mode. To do that, we're going to switch the mode on our keyboard, which for me, I hold down Shift, and then I select what mode I want to be in. And then we go up to our actions, and now we can just do the same process, but any inputs we give are now going to be the other MIDI channels that we had set up. So if we search volume and we scroll down, we'll see set volume for track 2. Now we're going to add. We'll use the same knob, but now you'll see it's channel 119 instead of 118. And for you, this will probably be different. It'll be whatever you had set up. But as long as it's a different channel, you should be good to go. And again, we'll set relative. Close out of all that. And now, if we hit play, we should be able to control each channel separately depending on the mode selection of our MIDI controller. And again, if we go up to actions, show action list, and search for solo, and remember we want to go down to toggle. If we go to toggle track 2, we add, and then we can press our button that we want, assuming that we're in the correct mode. And there we go. It's 15 now instead of 14, which is what it was before. So we just hit OK. So after we close out, if we were to hit play, we should be able to control each track separately depending on what mode we're in. course, this is just scratching the surface. If you look at that list of actions, you can really control almost anything in Reaper with these inputs. So really what you do is up to your own imagination and how you want to set up your workflow. Hopefully that was helpful for you, and if it was, consider leaving a like, and if it was really helpful, consider subscribing for more content like this. And if you have everything all set up now and you're ready to start making some music, but you need to brush up on some of your music theory skills, consider checking out my latest video here on chord inversions. I'm curious what kind of controls you guys are going to get set up using this technique, so if you have anything fun set up, feel free to let me know in the comments. And that's going to about do it for me, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.